Welcome back to the You Can Too podcast. On today's show, we have Paul Millard on the show. He is a writer, a consultant, a author of the Pathless path, and man, I'm really excited to jump into your story on what brought you down to where you are today, what inspired you to write the book, and kind of the mission that you're on to begin with. I'd love to hear like what was the first domino that like went down for you to lead into what you're doing today.
It's an interesting question, and thanks for having me, James.
Thank you.
I think one thing I write about in my book is that a lot of people think of life paths as, oh, you have this moment and then you transform. I
Mhm.
don't think life works like that. I think life is more of a slow unfolding, and sometimes we pay attention to the clues and signals that emerge. And a lot of times, and what I was doing for a bulk of my 20s was I just wasn't self aware enough to pay attention to them. So I think a lot of it starts with how I grew up. I didn't grow up with like a fancy prestige chasing, like you need to go to the best schools, you need to be super successful. I grew up in a pretty humble small town. My parents didn't go to college, and really the only goal was for me to go to college. There wasn't a lot of expectation. There weren't people around me living super fancy lives. So a lot of me getting caught up in chasing prestige, chasing success was of my own doing. And really it was a lack of really knowing myself or knowing what I wanted to do. So that sort of uh, basic, humble upbringing was always really easy to get back to. And I think the thing for me was I sort of went down the wrong path too long.
Yeah. Yeah, it took you about was it 4 to 5 years to really step out in 2017 to make that pivot?
Yeah, and I the questions were always there. And when you look back, things are so obvious. My
Yeah.
first internship at 17 years old, I didn't end up leaving the sort of what I call default path until I was 32, I think. It, but in my first internship when I was 17, I'm staring around and they basically gave me bullshit work,
Yeah.
right? Got to keep you busy, create this report about some purchasing decision that was already made. And it was clear to me that a lot of grown men were wandering around doing stuff that wasn't of consequence. And I would question these things. And basically, I would just get gaslit by adults. Well, you're just naive. You'll figure it out one day. You got to put in your work. You got to learn how to go through the motions. All these things, and a lot of that is sort of a working class, blue collar mindset, which can
Yeah.
be useful if the economy or world doesn't have other opportunities for you, right?
Yeah.
But we live in 2023. The internet exists. There are bountiful opportunities. There are people like you that are clear eyed going into this. And I meet people like you, and it's fairly obvious that the possibilities of the world are expanding, and it's really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, it truly is, and I find that most people everyone I've had on the podcast is we're all curious of, like, we question things instead of defining to the default path, and I think that there's 2 narratives there where you think for growing up, you're told, "Chase your dreams, go after what you want, really find your passion," kind of aspect of things, and then there's the other side where you have to be realistic and you can't really go down the path of, you can't just do whatever you want, you can't really have fun, you can't find that joy. When did that flip switch for you to realize that you can have both? Because I think that's a paradigm that not many of us live life through.
I'm pretty slow and dumb. So it probably wasn't even until after quitting my job. As background, I went to college at a big state school in the US, University of Connecticut,
Yeah.
and was part of the honors program. And I was surrounded by basically what I call world class hoop jumpers, people that want to figure out what do I need to do, what grades, activities, how do I need to behave,
Hmm.
talk, interview, all these things to get chosen, right? And I basically just figured out how to hack that game and conformed myself into those boxes. And I loved consulting, which I eventually broke into a year after graduating. And I did that for 9 years. I probably loved 3 to 5 years of it. The final few years, I was just on the wrong path.
Yeah.
And I think when I left, I was really just trying to run away from that path rather than leaning into possibility. It was not
Mhm.
until I left my job that first year that I had a little more space in my life. I was wandering a little bit more. I was sort of rebelling against this worker
Yeah.
rhythm of just showing up every day and grinding. And I was just wandering around, asking questions, reading books, meeting new kinds of people,
Mhm.
and the seeds of my current path were really planted in that first year. And after a year, I really decided to lean more into the unknown and the uncertainty than I had at any point in my life.
Yeah. And for you to be in that for such a long time, the sunken cost fallacy must have just like kept building to the point where it was like, okay, now it's the time to make a decision and really kind of maneuver out of this path because you're not fulfilled by it anymore. What was that thought process? Like, what was your internal narrative kind of jumping out of that? Because I think a lot of people deal with that.
I never struggled with the sunk costs, actually.
Mm,
It was as I made more money, I was able to build more savings, and that just
yeah.
gave me more confidence to take risks.
Yeah.
I've never been super attached to money as a prime aim.
Hmm.
It just doesn't get me out of bed. Um, but money can be useful, and money as sort of freedom to me was very exciting.
Yeah.
So as I started to build more of a retirement account, I mean, I haven't touched my retirement account. I haven't contributed as much as I would have liked in the last 5, 6 years. Um, but I had savings, and my mindset was I can spend down some of that savings to buy time. And it's very simple, right? That is something you can do. It's just not a lot of people do that. And it's seen as risky by other people. And it triggers the hell out of other people's emotions. But when you're on a path that doesn't make sense to other people, you realize a lot of what's happening when people raise their concerns is they're projecting their insecurities onto you.
Hmm. Yeah. And I know a big part for you was finding the people that were on the same path as you or some kind of community that you could surround yourself with. And I think the same thing for me. Like when I started my business, it was a lot of, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to surround myself with people that are doing it or that are on the same path. So I know that I'm not alone. And I think that's a really big aspect of it. Was that a priority to you when you first stepped out of it? Or did that become prominent when you realized that it was necessary?
Yeah, I realized it was necessary in the first year. It was not a goal when I quit my job. I didn't realize I would need new friends.
Yeah.
But it became crystal clear after when people either didn't understand what I was doing, they made fun of me, or there was just sort of a silence and a distance
Hmm.
where they didn't want to be near me, either emotionally or physically, because I triggered their insecurities. So it really made me want to find the others, as I say. I
Yeah.
mean, Timothy Leary has that phrase. I'm definitely copying it, but it there's a shared vulnerability. And I think this goes for relationships as a whole. When
Hmm.
there's a shared vulnerability, you're able to connect in a much deeper way. And when you're on an uncertain path, vulnerability is very powerful.
Yeah.
Like you feel uncertain. There's no way to pretend that doesn't exist. I think a lot of times in full time employment, there's this unspoken agreement where everyone just agrees, don't talk about how uncertain you are, and
Yeah.
I won't. We'll just pretend we're fine.
Hmm.
And for me, I'm just a reflective, contemplative person. I want to go deeper. I want to talk about these things. So I actually found it was a much better fit for me early on to be on an uncertain path, to be self employed, to not have a plan, to have low income, to have unpredictable financial flows.
I think so many of us struggle with that being a lifestyle or at least like a temporary lifestyle to be able to create the lifestyle that you now live today that you wake up excited every day. Like what why do you think that is about? Why do you think that you do have that ability to be more introspective about those things and allow yourself to take a step back so that you can set yourself up for success much longer in the future?
I've always just wanted to know how things work and why people are doing things.
Yeah.
I've always had a natural, sort of disagreeable spirit, questioning authority. And that doesn't work well when you're in traditional worlds.
No.
Uh, But when you're on an uncertain path, it's actually really helpful. And so I think I just found that, oh, this is a better fit for me. I can question things and make choices, and I have no one to complain to. I have to
Yeah.
take full responsibility for all my choices and life decisions. That's really exciting. And I think I'm married to somebody that also looks at life that way. So I can have these conversations with her. And we sort of share this more adventurous, reflective, contemplative spirit, and it's really exciting for us. So I think a lot of what I'm writing about in my book is sort of sharing, here's how I approach things, here's how I feel about things, here's why I think it matters. Not all of this is going to work for you, not that I give any sort of how to's anyway,
Of
but
course.
if you're feeling this way, it might be okay to feel this way. And a lot of people approach entrepreneurship, self-employment, solopreneurship, creator economy with this idea that like they're sort of chasing this job ideal
Hmm.
of, oh, I want to have predictable income, I want to know what I'm doing. You're never going to find that.
Yeah.
If you want that, the jobs are great. Jobs pay good salaries, especially in the US. Just go get a job. Like you have to look at the uncertainty and the struggle, and I wouldn't even use the word struggle because you're struggling on stuff you care about.
Of course.
The uncertainty, the just unknowns, that is a feature, not a bug on a path like this. And if you don't see it that way, it's probably not a good fit for you.
Yeah. I think a lot of us, like you spoke about earlier, is we're subscribed to this belief that we always have to be in movement to be making progress, to be moving towards that ideal, like you're talking about. And so for so many of us, we don't take the time to be reflective and introspective about what kind of life that we do want to live. What are some things that you kind of went through when you first stepped out of that to get more clear on what kind of life that you were optimizing for at the time?
Yeah, so I was a strategy consultant. I was making about 150 grand a year in New York. A lot of that just gets eaten up and by living in New York.
I'm in New York as well.
So nice.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, when I left, I didn't really have a goal to replace my income, but my only idea for what to do was just become a freelance consultant. And over the first 9 months, I made about $50,000.
Mm,
And for me, that was what I had lowered my cost of living to. It was actually much less than that. I had lowered my cost of living to about 36,000. This is a little easier in 2017. Like
yeah.
inflation is really ratcheted up in a lot of US cities.
Mm,
But yeah, 36,000 was sort of my goal. I made that in 9 months and I said, okay, given that I had left with savings, I sort of broke even for the first year and I gave myself permission to explore. So I stopped looking for consulting projects
yeah.
for about 4 months. I also planned a trip to Asia for a month and ended up taking one project that entire year, which
Mm,
I ended up working on from Asia and doing a little in Boston as well. But that whole year, the second year of self employment, it was probably like over 18 months. I made about $24,000.
yeah.
And it was one project that took about 3 months. And that whole year, I was just exploring. I started a podcast. I started writing. I started connecting with more people. I started just practicing non work,
Mm,
right? So we all have this idea like you need to work during a workday. Why? Take a month off, see what happens. And I had lowered my cost of living, eventually moved to Asia where it was much more possible. And looking back, that was probably the most important thing I've ever done in my life. After working continuously, not taking breaks between jobs for 10 years, I took some space, got to know myself, and became comfortable with the uncertainty, the unknowns, the financial insecurity, my bank account shrinking, all of that. And I just had a daughter about 4 months ago. It's really enabled me to lean into spending time with her.
yeah.
I'm working about 10 to 15 hours a week now. And that's enough for me. I'm comfortable. I'm totally okay with my income falling. I'm not optimizing for making more and more each year.
Yeah.
I'm optimizing for continuing to live the life I want to live.
I love that. And this the whole reason I wanted you like to come on the pod was that perspective in itself is we are so subscribed to this mindset that we need to be always moving forward, or we need to be always going higher in some way, in monetization, in the way that we're showing up on socials or whatever that looks like. But never do we really ask ourselves, what kind of life do we specifically want to live? Do we want to work 10-hour days to optimize for more income, or do we want to work 2-hour days to optimize for more enjoyment? And I love the mindset that you take to find more fun work instead of work that is like more so on the side of security, and just going for work that you actually enjoy and you like. What was that like? What was that thought process when you first came across that? Was that as soon as you jumped out of your consulting?
It wasn't right away, but it was sort of a slow realization that I liked creating things. I liked writing. I liked sharing ideas. I liked talking to people about ideas.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the rough uh, set of activities that was like, this is kind of what I want to build a life around. And I just kept doing that. I wasn't making any money from it. Like the idea of the creator economy didn't even exist at the time.
Yeah.
I just felt that like these things were worth doing. I'm willing to go broke doing them. I want to just keep practicing doing the things I claim to care about. I wanted to live in alignment with things I actually wanted to do. And I call this the real work of your life. The real work of your life is actually just figuring out, what are the things I want to do? What are the things I care about? Too many people in today's world are working on things they wish they could like more.
Yeah.
I wish I could be more into these things like my coworker. I wish I could be more motivated about earning money. Not going to work. You need to find out what like your natural pull is. What are you being pulled towards? What, when you stop doing it, do you need to keep doing?
Yeah.
Right? And for me, writing is one of those things. It turns out if you write continuously enough about ideas, you can create opportunities that can make money. I figured out how to do that. It took me a long time and I never really expected it. I never expected to make good money from my book. I thought I'd break even in the first year. I've made money from it. But I think there is some magic in really just committing to something that I cared about. Caring in a world that convinces you not to care is extremely valuable.
Yeah. 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 I love it. I think so many of us want to look like we're not trying, because maybe that makes us feel a little bit better about our situation in the world. But when we go out on our own and we actually again go internal instead of looking at the external, what do other people want me to do? What does society tell me I'm supposed to do? But more so ask ourselves, what do I really feel aligned with doing? And I always talk about that myself, where with this podcast, that's what I said was I felt like a pull to do it. It wasn't like I was pushed towards it, but when I'm not doing it, I feel off. What was that first process when you jumped into that to get clear on like, oh, writing is the thing for me. Writing is the thing that I actually want to pursue and create something from.
It just showed up. I was taking a break when I had been writing continuously off and on. I never looked at writing as like a thing I could do
Right.
for years. But I ended up moving to Taiwan about a year and a half after I quit my job. I had no plan. People were not hiring remote workers as freelancers. But I lowered my cost of living down to like under 1,000 a month. So I bought myself more time. And for me, it was, I just need to buy more time to figure out what I want to do. I have no idea what I want to do. I don't really have any clue. I'm just going to like wander and listen to podcasts, read in the park, and see what happens. In that first month, I remember being so excited with ideas, waking up, making coffee in this small Airbnb. I was staying in a twin bed in this
Yeah.
tiny room with like this mid 30s guy that always walked around in his underwear. Um, but he had this coffee maker, and not a lot of Taiwanese apartments have like coffee makers. So I bought ground coffee. I'd make it at home, and I'd sit down and open up my laptop, and I'd be so excited to
Yeah.
write. Like I just felt this aliveness that I needed to dump onto the page. And I sort of realized, oh, wow, this is it.
Yeah.
And I just need to keep this energy alive. And it became so obvious for me. And this is the thing, like, there are no hacks.
Mhm.
I just found something I like doing and decided I wanted to build my life around keeping that energy alive and continuing to do it no matter what. I didn't care if it made money. I didn't care if I spent all my savings figuring it out.
Mhm. I don't think
There's
many.
no way I could go back to my former life. I realized this within my first year. Like there was no going back. I would have to find a new way forward. So I had that driving me and it made me experiment, be pragmatic about trying to make money and doing things, but I didn't expect it. I wasn't tied to any sort of outcome.
I love that, and I think, the commitment is the commitment and the permission is what I think is, like, the 2 components where you have to give yourself the permission to be able to say, like, "I can do this thing," and then also give yourself the commitment to say, "I am going to do this thing," and giving yourself no other option to make that happen. I know one thing that you talk about in the book is, ship, quit, and learn, and I would love for you to dive into, like, what that looks like because I think that would help a lot of people kind of change their mindset around doing exactly that.
Yeah, it's just my simple model of the only reason to try something new is to learn about the experience. Learn about what to do next and learn about how it feels. So design something such that you can ship it as soon as possible, right? If you're starting a podcast, launch your first episode by next week.
Yeah.
You can do this super easily. Yeah, I don't even know if that's the right way to say it. You can do this so easily.
Yeah.
Here's what you do. Open up your computer, go to like a sound recorder, download Audacity, it's free.
Yep.
Record it on your internal microphone. Now, go to Adobe. Adobe has a free AI plugin. I forget what it's called. Just search Shasta, Shasta, um, and they will transform your crappy audio into something that sounds great. But sit down on your computer and just talk for 5 to 10 minutes about why you want to start a podcast, what you're curious about, who you're hoping to connect with, right? Just record that. Go to Spotify for podcasters. It's free. Create a cover art in Canva. You can use free templates and hit publish. You have a podcast. You can do that in a week. I did it with somebody once in an hour. I challenged them to launch a podcast in an hour. I launched somebody's podcast from Bali, and he never published another episode, but it doesn't matter. What you're practicing is showing up in different forms of agency. You're
Yeah.
trying to practice acting and like acting in new ways because in new actions comes information. Change creates information. Information can change how what you're going to do next, right? So it's a sort of like infinite experimental mindset of like you're always just learning, right?
Yeah.
And eventually you do enough experiments, you find things that are like, oh, that felt good. I could do this for a long time. Let me try 20 podcasts.
Mm.
Okay, I did 20. Once you make it to 20, you sort of know hundreds easy, right? It'll
Yeah.
be easy for me to get to 100. I don't know how long it will take. For me, it took 5 years. But once you find a game, you know you can keep playing, just keep playing it. That's it. It sounds super simple, but it's hard because there are distractions. There are the shoulds in our head. There are
Yeah.
the disappointment of our parents. There's the pressure from our spouses, all that.
Yeah. I love that, and I say this so much when I have people on the podcast. I started this podcast in my car because and with no
Love
interviews, it
it.
was like the thing that I always think about, like, what's the barrier to entry? Like, what's the easiest way that I can just get started and get into movement and then see if this is even what I want to do? Because most podcasters stop after, like, 7 episodes, like you said, like, he stopped after the first one, but it's like you do it to figure out if that's the thing that you wanna continue doing and just learn along even if it isn't, and just learn from that. The
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm so a side note, I think this is super important because like you've done 171 episodes.
Yeah,
So you're sending a signal to the world that you care. And I think that is super valuable. I've actually really tried to cut back on the podcasts I'm doing,
yeah,
but I said yes to you because you're doing these things when young. And I just think this message is so important for young people to realize you can just do things
yeah,
and you're staying in the game. So like I want to talk to you. I want to learn from you. Like I have questions for you. Like How, w- w- can I ask you a couple questions?
Please.
What?
Yeah.
So, how old were you when you started,
17,
and how old are you now?
19.
That's awesome. And how long do you think you're going to keep doing this?
I'm playing infinite games. I don't look
Uh,
for an end. I look for next
yeah,
week. I'm excited for it.
right. And how do you know that?
I think like you spoke about earlier, it's like finding things that pull you. Like you for writing, I'm not the most prolific writer, but writing like going through your writing, it's like it's really exciting. Like Derek Sivers, I know you had him on your podcast as well.
Yeah.
Going through his writing, it's like I want to learn from this man so much. And so for podcasting, I think I like talking with people. If I can read their book and then speak with the person, it's like I'm watching a movie and then meeting with the actor. It's like that's the coolest thing in the world. I don't I think that's cool.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you, you're actually not giving me the answer because the answer is hard. It's basically just a feeling. It's a
Yeah,
deep
exactly.
knowing in our body and our bones that you can't ever articulate. But what I'm like experiencing from you is you have this energy, this curiosity.
Yeah.
So you sort of know like that's the feeling you need to keep alive. Right? This is so important because so many young people go work in a job and it's really tricky because you're usually pretty excited about the job.
Mhm.
I was really excited about going to work in consulting and
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it too. I loved the work. I liked the people. I was challenged. I was pushed. I was coached. I got a lot of great feedback. But at some point, all those great things sort of like faded to the background. I
Mhm.
wasn't getting pushed as hard. I was becoming better. My incentives were forcing me to care about like political games. And it's so hard to notice that on a path, right?
Yeah.
And working on your own is far easier because you are not going to be motivated to keep doing the work if you've lost the energy. In a job, I like to say you can do 2 out of 10 motivation work over and over and over again because we hate disappointing people and
Yeah.
people hold us accountable. But do that long enough and you kill your fire, kill the fire in your soul.
Mhm.
And that is one of the most dangerous things in life. And I want people to know that there are other ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the whole basis of the podcast is we live through this mindset. I think so many of us live through these beliefs that don't serve us simply because we don't think that there's another alternative. And so with you and the pathless path is like taking a different perspective on it doesn't have to be money, it doesn't have to be prestige, it doesn't have to be all of these things that we're told that it has to be, but more so it's like defining what that looks like for us. And I think that that's so powerful. And the ought to trap is something that I think so many of us get stuck in. These we should all over ourselves, and then we put ourselves in a position that we feel that is the thing that we're supposed to be doing, but in deep down we know it's not.
Yeah. So, are you in college now, or did you drop out?
Never stepped foot.
Okay. What people always say, "Oh, Paul, you can do what you're doing because you worked in all these fancy companies."
Yeah,
What do you think of that?
I don't believe that
Why?
because I started a coaching business at 17 years old.
And that gave you enough evidence. It's like, oh, I can figure out enough things on my own.
I mean, I was the youngest person in the coaching program ever, and so when people looked at me like, "How is he even here?" Let alone how can I actually like make an income from this? It kind of proved to me as much as imposter syndrome as I had. It was like no, like other people that are 30, 40 just trying to figure this out have just as much imposter syndrome as me. But if I can figure it out, well, anyone can.
Yeah. That's so that's so inspiring, man. I love it. I'm rooting for you for sure. You're like a younger version of Danny.
I that means a lot, man, because I try to emulate what he's been able to create. The 3 episodes a week and how much effort he puts in. I try to do that myself.
Well, with each generation and age cohort, like when I graduated in 2007, like nobody was like doing creative stuff on the internet.
Yeah,
That was like a weird thing to do. Or graduated high school in 2003. Yeah, Facebook came out while I was in college, right? You were probably born as it was invented. I
yeah,
think that's actually
2003.
true. Yeah.
Yeah,
But Yeah, and so many people in my generation are so stuck.
Yeah.
And this is why I love talking to younger people because it's like you don't have all the baggage I have.
Yes.
I have this line in my book, the longer you stay in a path that's not yours, the longer it will take you to find a path that is.
Hmm.
My first several years of self-employment are just like not impressive.
Yeah.
Like I really struggled. And the reason I didn't make a lot of money is because I had to spend a lot of time sort of unlearning what I had learned, getting to know myself again, and really sort of like healing.
Yeah.
And it like this is why people are like, "Oh, you can do what you're doing because you did this path."
Yeah.
And it's like, "Yes, I learned a lot of stuff, but man, I wish I had left earlier and a lot poorer."
Yeah. Not many people take that though, like take that perspective, and that's why it's inspiring to hear your story because in entrepreneurship, you jump into it and you see people that are succeeding at such a massive rate, and you compare yourself off of those people, or you think that you see someone making $10,000 a month, and you immediately think, "Oh, if I'm not hitting that, I'm not succeeding, or I'm not worthy enough, or I shouldn't be going down this path." I remember there was a time for me when I worked in retail, and I did not want to be there anymore. And I said that I don't want to be here. And one of the employees that was working was there for longer than I was alive. Like he was there for 21 years. And he said, you get used to it. And I put my 2 weeks in a couple days after that because I just thought, "No, I don't want to ever get used to something that I don't really feel aligned with." And I think that kind of perspective is what you're taking. And I think that more people should take that would actually align them with a life that they truly love.
Yeah, and $10,000 a month. I didn't hit that on average for at least 50 months working on my own.
Yeah.
More than 4 years. Um yeah, and that was never the goal either. I had so much stuff I had to unlearn. Like it, I mean, I know you listen to me and Danny's conversation, like
Yeah.
I get so inspired by him because he dreams so big. Like I really sold myself short early on my path. I really struggled to set big goals because I I didn't think I was ambitious.
Yeah.
Like I thought I couldn't cut it because I had 10 years of evidence of just me moving against the flow of how I'm wired
Yeah.
and just not feeling motivated. I was motivated at first, but my motivation kept dwindling and I would always try to work less than other people and just like I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then it took me several years to really discover. And it wasn't until my fifth year of being self employed, it was like, oh, I might be ambitious, but ambitious in the way of I want to live like a bold life,
Yeah.
like a full life.
Hmm.
I don't want to have business success at the expense of other things. Like work is a lower priority for me. Me is like family, relationship, creativity, exploration, adventure, and then like paid work.
Hmm.
I'm still willing to burn it all to the ground. And luckily I found a partner, a wife who is very wired similarly. We have a lot of time freedom.
Yeah.
Um, and we are traveling. We've traveled a ton. We've lived in several different countries. And yeah, it's been a pretty good life so far. I'm rambling at this point.
Yeah. No, I love it, man. I really do. I think I think it's really powerful to take that kind of perspective, and it's the way that I like to see it, at least, is this past year I've really been entertaining this idea that the purpose of life is to enjoy the passage of time, and I think because
Beautiful.
when we get so caught up in this idea that work is our life, I mean, that's where our significance is for most of it. Is that's at least our perspective of it. Is then we neglect the things that are the most important, is the wondering, it's the exploring, it's the finding the creativity, the things that actually make us like want to wake up in the morning. And I think when we dive into those things more, life starts to become a lot more enjoyable, and it doesn't have to be about the monetary. Where I think just in the world that we live in, it's hard to unlearn that. I'm curious what that healing process looked like for you when you first stepped into it.
I th- yeah, I was listening to this podcast with this guy Jeremy Giffen.
Hmm.
Um He was on Invest with the Best. I've actually met him. He's a great guy. And he talks about people who are pre-fall and post-fall.
Mm,
Um, and it's sort of an interesting lens. And this is maybe some way I think about it now, which is like, have you sort of been broken and had to be reborn,
yeah,
transformed in a powerful way? I know you've been through some very intense experiences far earlier than people should have to experience these things. And I think like it's not about looking at life as age. It's sort of looking about like when do you start living after you've listened to
yeah,
the call to adventure, right? In the hero's journey. Um, some people don't ever listen. And I think for me, it was a health crisis, losing my grandfather, and also being in a world where I was in business school and it was great. I loved the experience, but I sort of came out and didn't really have a plan. And then recovering from the health crisis over the next 2 years in that first job, I sort of realized like I need to find a way out. I need to find a way to start my life.
yeah.
I
I
don't know if
think
that answers your question directly.
no, no, it does because I think for like you said, like I lost a lot of family growing up, and so it kind of put mortality in the
Yeah.
forefront of my life, and it was like, okay, you can live a life that you don't love, or you can try doing something that you do love, fail at it, but that's going to be a much more enjoyable path than going down something that doesn't feel aligned, even if I'm making all the money in the world. And I've always seen life through that lens, and I think for so many of us, we want it to be a certain way, or we think it needs to be a certain way. And the permission that you talk about, I think, is really, really powerful because we think that someone else needs to tell us that it's okay to go down this path, or it's okay to create a different kind of path. And we have all of these preconceived notions about how life is supposed to be. When you did take that leap, what was that what was that thought process breaking through the societal norms that were around you? And I know for me, like there's a lot of people closely to me that were the ones that were pushing me down the most,
Mm.
really.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think the internet is great because you can find the others
Of
that
course.
are asking questions in a similar way. But a lot of times we have family members who mean well, but really are uncomfortable if you're going to take a different life path.
Yeah.
That's just hard. That's unavoidable. I think it raises the stakes to finding the others.
Hmm.
But yeah, uh, I don't know. There's no way around that. I think.
Yeah.
It all you can do is sort of lean into it. And for me, it was actually like people are like, was it hard to leave? I was so burnt out on my
Yeah.
previous path that it was like, yeah, like I was flailing at the end. My final 6 months are just pathetic. I was like so bad at the
Yeah.
game I was playing. And I feel bad for like my coworkers. I was just grumpy and like I self-sabotaging. I was in the wrong game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was very easy for me to walk away. I actually underestimated so much about what was going to come. I was just so burnt out and not burnt out and working a lot of hours. It was actually like I wasn't working enough hours on things that mattered to me.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't aligned. And that is actually much harder for people than working too many hours. If you work crazy hours and you burn out, it's very clear what the issue was.
Hmm.
But if you don't actually care about what you're doing, that can be a lot harder. It can sneak up on you.
Yeah. Like you said about the health crises and then and losing family, I think for so many of us, we wait until it's at the forefront. Like something bad has to happen for us to realize, like, oh, something needs to change. And I know, like you said, it's like you wish that you had left earlier because of that exact experience. How can people start to take steps towards that, knowing that there doesn't have to be a dramatic experience for you to make a shift?
Yeah, I think as I write in the book, it's sort of a slow unfolding. And
Mhm.
this is what I've discovered in my podcast is that the seeds of change are planted often years before they
Yeah.
happen, right? And there's questions along the way, there's random experiences, there are people you meet. Some people that process is fast. For me, it was about 3 to 4 years.
Mhm.
And it only becomes visible once you make an external change, like changing job to from employed to unemployed.
Yeah.
That's very visible to other people. But for me, it was like this, like quitting the job was like the final step.
Mhm.
I'd already done a lot of the work to get there. It was very obvious what to do next. So I like quitting wasn't actually that hard. It was, yeah, it was just like the last thread. It's like boom, cut, and then you're done.
Yeah. I always say that change is a choice before it's a decision, or change is a choice before it's a process. You have to consciously decide. You consciously decided months ago that like this is not the path, like this is not the thing that I want to do, and then actually going out of it and like tangibly seeing that okay, I'm taking a step out of this was when the final um thing went through. I think you talk about the difference between lazy and leisure. And I think for many people that listen to this podcast, they're high achievers. They're subscribed to the belief that if I'm not moving, I'm dying. And I don't like to subscribe to that. I think from what your work is talks about, it's kind of optimizing for more of a life of enjoyment. Can you dive into what the differences between lazy and leisure would look like?
Yeah, I mean, my morning, I woke up, ran some errands on my bike, and then rode around Austin for like an hour and a half, taking random turns.
Yeah.
Rode through UT's campus, and yeah, it just like think and pay attention and notice things. And I love being in that state. Like I notice if I'm not wandering or shifting into that more contemplative mode enough that I actually like need it. And me and my wife are very attuned to this, and we often tell each other like when we need it. It's I'll say to her like I need time. I need like half a day to sort of wander and be with myself. She has like her me time days,
Yeah.
and it's a very important part of our life. For me, I get a lot of it from biking around, taking long walks, and
Hmm.
I've done a lot of practices around that. I used to do every 6 weeks. I'd take a seventh week off and no work, just wandering, just be open to what the day brings me. Um, I did that for 2 years and it was a great practice. I've done several creative sabbaticals where I don't work on paid work. I just do creative projects that excite me. I've done no work for a month. Just did 2 weeks of basically no work. I did maybe an hour or two a week.
Yeah.
And I'm just paying attention and I'm trying to exist and notice what emerges. And yeah, I'm taking a more creative path. And if you read creators throughout history,
That's
that's
what they did.
often the norm.
Yeah.
It's creative bursts followed by rest and relaxation, right? Um, Kevin Kelly says a lot of people talk about work ethic, but they don't talk about rest ethic. And rest, I think, is a serious practice that you need to actually practice. And I try to do it. Um, but yeah, leisure is not a vacation. Vacations are usually too busy. Um, and leisure is not sitting and watching television. Leisure can be active. Leisure can be a full immersion in an activity. And like one of the best books on this is Leisure, the Basis of Culture. It's like a 70-page book from Joseph Pieper after World War II. And it makes a profound case for leisure as the basis of culture.
Yeah. Creative people, when you do look back, a lot of their time wasn't spent working. It was a lot of introspection time. And I know for me, something that I didn't realize I was doing so young, but I've been like taking long walks since middle school. And I remember in high school, kids would be like, "What are you going on walks for?" And it's like, I needed them. Like these are like the time for myself to build my relationship with myself. And I think it has to be something that you prioritize in your life. Otherwise, you're just going through the motions in life, which most people are doing.
Well, you had to grow up a lot earlier than other people too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's also like our modern schooling and the way the world works. Like we're basically trying to turn kids into little office workers,
Yeah.
right? During the pandemic, we like teaching 8-year-olds how to use Zoom.
Yeah.
It's like should have just told them to go play.
Yeah. We need more play in our lives. I don't think we don't
Yeah.
we don't we don't prioritize that enough.
The darkest moment in my youth was the last day of recess.
Wow. Wow.
not
Yeah.
not not I mean it wasn't that dark, but
Yeah.
it It's sad. I remember feeling so sad.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
fifth grade or whatever. Recess ends in fifth grade.
yeah.
Like that's crazy.
I, I never to this day, and this is why I subscribe so much to what you talk about, is because we are living by this belief that it's not possible to live a life as you're living. And I think for many of us, we are in this high paced, we have to be moving, we have to be going, we have to be achieving. And I think it's this unlearning within ourselves that we have to come to the awareness of. Throughout your time of traveling and journaling and writing and everything that you've done, the introspection, what do you think has had the biggest impact on you in building your relationship with your self-awareness, I guess I would say?
I think it's just time. I
Mm,
think it was creating space. And whether it was using that space to be creative and writing is a great
yeah.
reflective activity, almost necessary if you're going to take an unconventional path, and is why so many people start writing when they take a sabbatical. But yeah, space and time, really enough disconnection from like the default mode of society is just this constant motion and busyness, and it's not natural. We need to disconnect such that we can actually engage with that like rhythm in a healthy way. And I think you can if you have enough distance and I know who you are and you know who you are and you know what games you don't want to play, you know what desires aren't really yours, they're actually just other people's. And yeah, it just takes an insane amount of time, which is extremely costly.
Yeah.
And the earlier you can take it, I think the better. Right. And some people aren't ready. It's not just an age thing.
Yeah.
Um, you need to be aware that like taking space and creating distance and reflecting, wandering, maybe living in a different country, these things are so valuable. And when you're ready for them, it's probably time to go do it. Have you
Yeah.
lived in another country yet?
I definitely I've been thinking about it a lot, and I have to say I definitely have been putting it off. I haven't decided where I want to go, but I have the freedom to be able to do so, and it's something in the forefront that I want to do.
You're too wise for New York. You got to go wander.
I know. I don't want to be here. I definitely don't want to be here. But I and I appreciate that I appreciate that compliment as well. You have been writing for a long time, and you're prolific at writing, and there's a reason that your book continues to grow, and I think year by year it's just going to continue to compound. I'm curious what writing has not only taught you about yourself, but how it's changed your perspective of the world.
My writing is never finished.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is it sort of surprises me every time I sit down and what emerges. One thing that emerges, like I might have an idea and then I try to put into writing and it's like, oh, that's shit. That's crap. And what
Yeah,
I discover is that a lot of like the random floating crap that is in our mind is pretty crappy
yeah,
for the most part. Oh, I think I like this. I think I'm interested in this. I think I want to set up my life in that. Put it to the page, and you're like, oh, I have no idea what I think.
yeah,
So it's really humbled me. And I know that thoughts in the mind probably are pretty crappy unless I've really thought through them, put them on the page, talk them through with people, and refine them over time. I think the reason my book is so powerful is because it was years of doing that. It
mhm,
was sort of like hard won wisdom that I tested in my real life.
yeah,
And I'm brutally honest about all the ups and downs about that. Um, yeah, and that I love it too. Like I'm an ideas person. I like changing my mind. I like seeing the evolution of my ideas. I like trying to get better at writing. Writing's the best. Like,
yeah,
I wish I knew I liked writing much earlier in my life. It would have been so useful for me to be aware of this, even though I was writing random blogs, but not often.
yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't until 2018 that I really committed to write most days.
yeah. Is there, because I think for a lot of us, like especially me, like I'm someone that I want to write more, but I can't say I prioritize it to the level that I really. say that I want to. I do a lot of voice memos to my phone instead of journaling, because that's like my form of doing so, to actually show up and do the thing I said I was going to do. How can more people get into the habit of writing, but also being more introspective? Is there questions that you ask yourself? Is there a process that you walk through?
I don't know. I have to write. when I didn't really do any work the first couple of months of my daughter um, being born.
Mhm.
And the only thing I missed was writing.
Wow.
That was it. All the other stuff, I'm fine. maybe podcasts. I do love the conversations of podcasting. Um, but yeah, I have to write. And maybe I'm forgetting the beginning. I take that back. So like one thing I would recommend is like commit to a dumb stupid goal with writing.
Mm.
So like do 100 of some form of writing. You can do that a lot faster than podcasting. Podcasting is like a painful long game.
Yeah.
Um not painful if you like it, but it just takes a damn long time.
Yeah.
Um writing, I did this thing in 2014 where I woke up and before I started my work at my job in my office, I would write a post on Quora.
Mm.
So try Quora now. If not, like try to do Twitter.
Yeah.
And just do 100.
Yeah.
Dumb, stupid goal. The only thing you're doing is ship quitting and learning, right?
Yeah.
Design it to quit. If you don't like writing, quit it
Yeah.
after 100,
It's
right?
powerful. Yeah.
Let's see. I'm going to pull up your Twitter profile.
It's been a minute since I've been on Twitter. I have to
Yeah,
say,
maybe don't use
I'm
Twitter. Try
yeah, not the
Threads
place I go.
if that's better. You have
Yeah.
2,600 tweets. It's not enough. You don't have enough evidence that you don't
No, I
like
don't.
writing.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to
But
I have to get in the habit of doing so.
no. You don't have to get in the habit.
Mm.
You just have to pick a dumb, stupid goal, try it, but quit it if you don't like writing. Just be honest with yourself if you don't like writing.
Yeah.
But like eliminate the should from your head. I should write more. I want to write more. Both bad words. I want to or I should. Like I
Yeah.
have to. Find the
Mhm.
things you have to do.
Yeah.
And I actually think you'll probably find a relationship with writing, and maybe it's just
I
not
think so
time
too.
now.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I've been optimizing for the podcast, and so I haven't prioritized Twitter or other platforms, because I'm thinking this is the number one thing, and anything else is distracting me from the number one thing. But it is something that I do want
Yeah.
to prioritize, or something I want to, because I like speaking with people like you and Derek Sivers and Seth Godin, and people that are just they're amazing writers, makes me want to write a book. And so like I want to get in the habit of doing so, that I can eventually do that one day, because that's something that I aspire to do.
Don't write a book. Write 100 posts first, and then
Mhm.
see if you're ready for the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, speaking of books, how do I get sponsored on one of your shelves?
You let me, man. You got right in front of Ego's Enemy. You let me know. That spot's yours.
I'll send you one.
You got it. You got it. That's your spot. There's
I always want.
you got it, man. There's
I'm trying
one.
to
Go ahead.
outcompete the traditionally published authors.
You're doing it. You're doing it very well.
Not Ryan Holiday, but some.
You know, yeah, not everyone can be Ryan Holiday, but I think that your mission, because I'm a big Ryan Holiday fan myself, but your mission and the kind of mindset that you bring, Ryan Holiday has obviously different perspectives on things, but what you're talking about aligns so much with everything that I want to talk about and everything that I stand for, and just breaking through these barriers of belief that so many of us live by. And yeah, that's all yours, brother. There is one last question I ask every guest though, and I would love to dive into this: is what belief are you currently unlearning?
Oh, geez, so many. um, I think I'm realizing I have a belief that I'm not the kind of person that is successful, or yeah, something around success. I think I've uncovered I have some sort of fear or opposition to being successful on a solo path.
Mm,
I think I wrapped up this idea of success of like these burnt out husks of men that were
yeah.
ahead of me on my old path. And I think I played too small for too long on my current path, and I'm still leaning into it. It's very uncomfortable for me. I
Mhm.
mean, like, even when you say, "Oh, your book's going to grow and continue to sell over time," my default reaction is like, "He's wrong." So yeah, stuff is hard. Still trying
Yeah.
to learn, man.
What would you say, like, where I wanna say, like, where does that come from, but more so, 'cause I hate asking the question, like, what's your definition of success? But, like, what would you say is, like, a success for your book? Or what would you say is, like, "Okay, now I can consider myself successful?"
Oh, I already am successful. There's no
And that's it.
goals.
Yeah.
Um, really just having the freedom to continue to live the life I want to live.
Yeah.
Um, Success is a journey. It's not a destination, right? And so my book was already successful at 0 sales because, man, it was so much fun to write. I
Yeah.
loved it. It was such a delight to hit publish, and like really I only cared that my wife read it.
Yeah.
um I didn't really care about anyone else. I didn't even care if it sold. One sale was far beyond what any success. And this is one thing I'm having to learn. Like, am I setting my sights too low? Like, how do you dream bigger? I don't know. I'm not good at these external goals, but yeah, I'm already successful.
Yeah. I full support of that, and honestly, that could be a you can see it as a good or bad, it's all what we perceive it to be, but I think for so many of us that are living on an external and you focusing simply on the internal, I think that a lot of people are trying to do the exact opposite, and even if they have all the success in the world on the outside, and as your book continues to grow, as I say, is like, you've already succeeded on the inside, so it doesn't even matter what the external looks like, but just know that it genuinely will, and I believe fully in that, and I think you do deep down too.
You and Danny are so similar. I love it.
That's a compliment. I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show. All your links, the book, your website, Instagram, Twitter, all that kind of stuff, it'll all be in the show notes. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate your time.
Awesome.